All right, friends, let me just go over really quickly tonight for those of you who just arrived, and I will share this again. Welcome to class. As always, a privilege and a pleasure being here with you. I'm really looking forward to your student presentations. They will be wonderful. For those of you who just arrived, that is a link for the presentation sign-up sheet if you haven't signed up for the following time. Okay, so that's we're doing 8 tonight. The final assignment that is due about three to 4 weeks from now, December 7th. I'm sure that it will be fantastic. Just as a sort of a reminder, as always, fieldwork placement time record forms. You need to do 36 hours, as far as I remember. Submit them as soon as you can. Like, obviously, I don't want to push you too much, but try to get them in by December 7th. So that will make a lot of people's lives easier. Please, and I've said this before, don't leave it to the last day. That would be, just in case something weird happens. And post-COVID, weird stuff happens. All right, so again, for those of you just arrived, I will share it one more time. This is the link. And for those of you who have seen this already, who've logged in, I know that when people log in after other people, they don't get the privilege of seeing the previous shares via the chat. For presenters, you have about 5 to 10 minutes in total for your presentation. Ideally, shoot for 10 minutes. And that can be, 3 minutes of discussion. Like I would aim like ideally like 3 minutes of your presentation and maybe 7 minutes of discussion, or about 5 minutes of presentation and 5 minutes of discussion. Some kind of like, maybe try not to have it all just you or all just class discussion. I'm going to be, as soon as we're starting, I will share the screen with all participants. So you basically control your presentation. In the middle of your Zoom, there's a thing called New Share, and you should be able to use that. We will be going in order of the signups, and I will share those in just a second. For the rest of the class, if you're listening, ideally, you can comment via the chat, but I think the best thing would be for you to add your comments via the Google Doc. So I added space below the person's name for you to be able to do that. I would try to do at least 2 or 3 comments, like try to comment on at least 2 or 3 other like peer work. That would be really useful. So just, and then we'll try to sort of spread it out. Okay, so the order is we'll be starting in about a minute or so. John is first, then Neil, then Netta, then Joe, then Marika, then Zachary, and then Ian, and then Arndt, and then I will be doing some final presentation. So I'm doing, I think I told people before, I'm doing a peer observation. So basically I need to record this this lecture, and it will be, not used beyond other faculty use here at Hunter. So I'm sure it will only be used for just, about 3 or 4 days for it to be reviewed, et cetera, et cetera. So to that effect, please feel free to turn your cameras on or off. Please feel free to turn your mics on or off. Please feel free to use the chat function if you'd like, but I know that you may not want to. What I would highly suggest, if you are really worried about your privacy, please just provide via our content management system, which is Blackboard, and we're using Google Docs for this, and I will share that link one more time. Please add feedback there, so all of us will see it, and then third-party people will not. Okay, and I'm going to share that. I'm going to share the Google Doc place where you add your comments in just a second. John, are you ready to go? I hope that.
I'm ready.
Fantastic. I've stopped. Screen sharing is on for those of you who just arrived. The presentation signups are again right here, and I apologize for those of you who've arrived here a little bit earlier. Anytime, good sir.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any slides. I'm just gonna talk. So
fantastic.
Apologies if you like the visual aid or whatever, but I'll try and go fast anyways, so we can just open it up. But essentially, I did my profile on the teacher I was observing. We'll call him Phil because that's his actual name. But he's a band director at Talent Unlimited High School. He teaches concert band, jazz band, and then he has like other periods where he gets like smaller groups of students, so he can work on them like in instrument sections and stuff like that. So he sees a lot of the same kids for a lot of them like 2, maybe even 3 periods per day. He gets a lot of time with his students, and just an idea, like the bands are about probably the maximum class size the DOE allows. So I think, which is like 36 students or something, or 32. So he gets a lot of time with his students, and he's really well liked. He really knows his stuff. He's like an expert in a lot of wind instruments. Knows a lot about brass instruments, so he's able to communicate effectively with like everybody in his bands, and he gets a variety of skill levels, which is like very challenging to do. And he's just really successful at it. It's like it's an arts high school, so it wasn't easy getting that job. The thing that interested me, and this I started noticing this, and I actually kind of made sort of an offhand, like kind of jokey question to one of the students, and I asked the student, does Phil, does he always like chide you guys? Like he has this kind of really sarcastic, biting way of telling them they're not playing the right way or whatever. And he's kind of funny, but like really, he like gets into you. It's not totally nice, right? It's kind of, there's kind of like a sarcastic negative tone there. And the student got really defensive, or not like really defensive, but he made sure to like explain to me that no, it's totally cool. This is how he interacts with us, and like it's all out of love and all of this stuff. Like he wanted to make sure I didn't think that it was like a negative way or whatever. And so kind of got me thinking about just how band directors operate. I don't know how many of you have actually had experience playing in like school bands and stuff, but it's very much like the conductor is like does most of like 99% of the talking. His job is to rehearse the same music over and over again and stop when people are like making mistakes or playing badly, and he tells you that you're playing badly. And hopefully, and he does this a lot, is like offer constructive way for you to think about what you're doing and like improve on it. But at other times it's like not even this kind of negative or reinforcement. It's more like you're just kind of being ridiculed a little bit for like not knowing your stuff. Like sometimes he'll be like, maybe he's like tired or something and like impatient. Somebody just sounds bad and it's like playing a part that doesn't sound good enough, and he just goes like, he'll just say like, "Oh, gross," or something, and then like, no, just do it again. Right? And it's there doesn't seem to be a lot of I don't know, like educational substance there in those interactions, but everybody's kind of okay with it. And I just think it's it's interesting because I know like there's kind of like this old school thinking of, and which is I'd say it's like pretty proven that there are like negative reinforcers that do help motivate students. Like if you don't like do well on an assignment, you'll get a B or something. There's kind of like natural consequences that teachers use all the time that are totally fine. And then there's just this kind of teaching, which is just kind of calling you out, almost kind of like shaming people into I guess in like the most loving way possible into playing their part. It's, we're creating like an aversive, or what they call like something that makes you uncomfortable. They're not like, oh, if you do better, we'll take away a naturally occurring aversive. I'm just gonna like shame you for doing this. And he's like, he appears to be, in his worst teaching self, he appears to just be just doing this like, he doesn't necessarily mean to, but it's just kind of in his style. That's the way he learned. And we talked about it, like his teacher growing up, his bassoon teacher basically never told him anything positive ever, and that's just kind of the status quo of things. So he's kind of like the modern evolution of that style of teaching, I would say, is that like he's like trying to show like positive, nice, the like nice cop kind of thing. Like he's trying to he'll kind of compliment people sometimes, which is improvement from his education. But it's not always that, but it's not necessarily ineffective. But yeah, I'll stop talking now and open it up. But that's kind of the gist.
I wonder, I'll just say something just really briefly, just based on some of our previous like discussions. In terms of Carol Dweck and her work on mindset, do you think that he uses that kind of the negative tone, that negative discourse in a way it's showing that these people are not fixed? Like it's more of a growth mindset. Like I wouldn't lovingly chide you if I didn't think that you could rise to the occasion. So I think that again, Phil embraces this growth mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he's so invested in their improvement on a day-to-day basis. Like if you're if you're struggling with something, he'll go out of his way to make sure like you're working on it, or that you're making steps to improve. Like he cares so much. So like when that does happen, when he does just get pissed off, that it's like there's all this other extra stuff that he's doing, that's like supporting you too. So you just kind of you can feel both of those things, I would say.
Cool. How about we have Marika with a question, and we have about 2 minutes ish left. So and then there's another hand. How about we go to Marika and then Neil, and then we can have maybe John do a quick wrap up.
Okay, it was just really quick. I actually wrote it in the doc too. My kid's band teacher is exactly the same way. Like he will call, because I sub sometimes in the school, so I watch him, and he will, you can only call it like sarcastic ridicule. And they he'll call them out for like hiding behind like another player, like not, they'll be more like pretending to play, and he'll be like, wait a minute, and but it shows that he's like really paying attention. But it was funny when John was talking about it, I was like, are they all like this? It's crazy.
John, do you want to respond?
Yes, they are like all like that.
Neil, do you want to broach your question, and we'll let John respond and then wrap up.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting the way you talk, because I see myself as sort of communicating in the same way a lot of time. I think it's because it was the way I was talked to by my stepdad when I was a kid. Like it's kind of the way I was raised, and I like being communicated to like that. And so I feel like it's very comfortable for me to reciprocate it when I'm on the other side. However, I've noticed it doesn't work with like every kid. Like a lot of kids will just shut down. And so I'm wondering how much of our teaching style is a product of how we were raised, and how that can be maybe that can coalesce or contradict to our students' personalities and how they're being raised. It's interesting. So thank you.
Yeah. I had something I was gonna say, and then it kind of left my head. Yeah, well, what I was thinking from Marika's comment, it's like attention, right? It's like you're giving them attention. Like it might seem kind of bad attention, but it's also like, oh, I'm paying attention to you, like, so let's do this together. And yeah, I don't think it works all the time. Sometimes like he kind of did it like in kind of like a more impatient way with a kid that I know had only been playing like for a month. I'm just kind of like, this isn't gonna work, right? Like he's only been playing the instrument for like a month. Like he's doing his best. Like he just sounds bad because that's what happens, you know, and then yeah, you kind of have to like, I think he knows the kids really well. So you know, he's like built up a relationship and stuff. You can't necessarily just walk in day one and start like treating people like that.
John, may I say one quick comment, and then maybe if you want to wrap up, if you have something, if you have a close, you're more than welcome. It's interesting where I think about the idea of discourse, and then we think of discourse, I think in K to 12 environments and even tertiary education as being an oral discourse, or then we do online, so it's via chat. It's interesting where you said before, I think you said it was 90 or 95% of the time that Phil teaches, it's him sort of leading the show. And then it's interesting where I was just thinking about this. I haven't been in a music education, like a music education class in a long time, that I wonder that students' expression of themselves through their instrument is their form of discourse, where although Phil's talking a lot, the traditional oral discourse is dominated by Phil, but the rest of the time the sound is produced by students. So it's like this a really interesting balance of discourse and how it's communicated in multiple forms.
Yeah, that's true. I will say there are plenty of criticisms you can make about music education in this country, and I think there was recently a big article that on like in the New Yorker about it, and that like it probably does need to be more like about students and not about like just the program and going to competitions and like learning, you know, only a handful of pieces and like trying to make this perfect product and like make the director happy and stuff. Like they are expressing themselves, but you know, it's limited in that context too. That's a whole another conversation. So yeah, sorry, went over time.
Oh God, no. Thank you so much, John. As I'll just share the screen really quickly. Just for those of you who may have arrived late. So we're going John, then Neil, then Netta, then Joe, then Marika, then Zachary, then Ian, then Art. I will share again one more time the presentations if you need to add written feedback. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop my share. And Neil, if you want to share something, you're more than welcome to. You're more than welcome to do something oral, like John did. The floor is yours.
Can you all see my presentation?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right.
Wait a minute. No. Now, yes.
No? Yes? Okay, thanks for the
Yes.
verbal confirmation, Marika. Okay, cool. All right, so my creative title is Adolescent Profile. I had a lot of option because I have a lot of students that I would love to interview. I picked one of my juniors. His name is Josiah. He is a junior. No, I already said that. And I am with him every morning in second period for my field work. So I sit next to him most mornings and help, or I'm just with him while he's taking Spanish 3, also known as Pre-AP Spanish. And he's also a member of my chess club. So I see him every Tuesdays and Thursdays in seventh period. And we have a really good relationship, and he was really happy to do the interview. I have an interview transcript that I might refer back to, but that might be out of the scope of this short presentation. So I interviewed him about his experience at school, his experience with news, and his experience as a language learner, which were the 3 main focuses of the interview. And my paper was basically the interview itself. I took about 70% and put it on the final document. And then I did my analysis in the form of 3 observations or footnotes. The first one was social media versus cable news. I thought it was interesting that Josiah, like, he's a big YouTube fan, as I am. Like, that's his main social media application, and I don't have any social media, but I use YouTube all the time. So we were pretty much the same. And he was very aware of the fact that YouTube uses algorithms to produce clicks, and even to the point where it will radicalize the viewer and does not prioritize any sort of truth. And for that reason, he said that he and his family really preferred cable news, which I hadn't heard in a while. I was not expecting that from him. Something that I was thinking was that I think it might be risky to, it seemed like during the interview, like there was this like juxtaposition of veracity between YouTube and what you see on like Brooklyn 12, which is what he watches, because YouTube, that it's trying to get you to click and subscribe. And I think if if you're going to evaluate the news as better, it should not be in comparison to YouTube, because I think it establishes this sort of undeserved merit for cable news, while the only reason that kids might, there's a danger in thinking that then what you see on TV is true simply because you compare it to social media. So I was reading one of the articles that we had for class, and one of the differences that this article with Lazar was that there are different norms and processes for ensuring accuracy and credibility on cable or like a news channel, which I'm sure probably more about, Dino. But I thought that was interesting. My second footnote was that I asked him what makes him feel cared for in school, and he mentioned teachers that give them opportunities to interact with their subject matter outside of school. He mentioned that he's seen like a lot of teachers that come into school and that the students can tell they're just trying to collect a paycheck, and that I remember he told me that if teachers really, if you want to be a great teacher, you really have to care about your subject matter. And I was thinking about that and quoted this textbook I was reading for my other course, which contrasts the integrative versus instrumental approach. Josiah, he's referring to like integrative approach, which is where you would, in my context, I'm a Spanish teacher. So integrative approach is like where you go out into the community and use language as a tool to sort of fit in with native speakers. Sort of like when I get a haircut, or if you're at a bodega, there's just a ton of Dominican places right outside the school. But and it's like literally like a 2-minute walk. Like you could take your kids out and have them do projects where they're interacting with native speakers, and get them back in time for the next period. And this really made me reflect, because what we more often see in my school is this instrumental approach in which we use language to fill an academic requirement. And that's basically what our Spanish curriculum is dominated by. And I mentioned this in my final write-up, but we basically have, and I'm sorry for the redundancy of the word basically, but we have a curriculum that defines authentic tasks in accordance to what the students will see on the AP exam when they're seniors. And we have it's very tailored towards the 6 tasks that students will see: writing an email, writing a persuasive essay, responding to a recording, and writing. So basically we kind of define these authentic tasks as dictated by the AP exam, created by the College Board. Each task has a 15-point rubric, and each 15-point rubric has 3 columns of 5 points, which are task completion, language use, and topic development. Like I remember that off the top of my head, and it takes precedence over any sort of interaction that kids have with native speakers. And like hearing a student put that into words, like that they would like their teachers to email them about stuff outside of school was it was hard to hear, and to a certain point, because I feel like as a teacher, I'm not fulfilling that right now. And the third one was artificial intelligence. And I asked Josiah, because I've been having this thought myself, like why study language in an era where you can get ChatGPT or Google Translate to write you an article in most foreign languages that are similar to English, or translate a web page, right? Or you type in text to talk, and you could basically have an interaction with someone in another language without learning the other language. And I asked him, does it like make you more motivated, make you less motivated to learn a language? And he said, it doesn't really affect me. It's about the same, which was surprising. And I was actually talking to a friend's mom during a report card conference last Thursday, and I asked, like, I was asking a lot of my students, like, what do you think? Like, why, like, the fact that you can use Chat GPT or Google Translate for your homework, does that make you less motivated to like learn a language? Because I could definitely see that being true. And you know, one of my students' mother was like, no, I work for a call center, and every time I have to dial in a translator, I really wish I could actually speak Spanish. And what she's referring to is this integrative approach that I mentioned on the previous slide, um, where, before you're writing emails, before you're reading articles, before you're writing any sort of persuasive essays or completing these academic tasks, I think what people really want to do is interact with natives. I mean, that's why you come to a language class. And it was really refreshing to hear that, because there's some element of that ChatGPT can never do. However, it is sad because it seems like in the context of my school, we are our curriculum is antithetical to this sort of like authentic interaction. So I guess that's kind of a quick boil down of my interview with Josiah. And I guess a question I would have for y'all is, maybe as not language teachers, many of us, like, do all these translating features kind of make you feel like there's no need for language class anymore? And yeah, that's the end of the presentation. So thank you. I see Ian has his hand raised.
Yeah, I mean, in that to just jump right into answering your question, I I think part of what's great about language learning is the like transformative part of like the rewiring your brain and stuff like that, because I um have briefly, I took high school Spanish. I took a little bit of college German, and like every time I do it, I just think like this is great. This unlocks a new, like, it really does just change some processes that really, I don't know, just it's very enticing on a intellectual level. I don't know. I don't know if you guys agree, but that's my thought.
There is a hypothesis that the language we learn natively changes the way we think about the world, which is definitely true. I'm wondering how true that is when you have languages that are as similar as English and Spanish. But definitely transformative. I don't know what order people went in, but I
As
see
far as I
Netta,
think,
Joe.
I think it might have been John, then Netta, then Joe, then Art.
Yeah, just this the kid seems really smart, because AI wouldn't, it shouldn't change anything for anybody, because as it turns out, like, we like to learn things ourselves, and there's like immediate benefit from doing that. And yeah, it's funny that we are really academic about language, because that almost feels like it's it's kind of like it, or it should be like the least academic thing, at least, you say it's all the AP tests and like prepping for college, and like we just speak it. Like, that's just, everybody does this thing, like it's universal, it's very natural, like it doesn't have to be, that's what it should be, at least in my mind. I'm sure there is like a whole world of academia, but
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time, but what you say is really interesting, because it's also easy to be dismissive of using language for academic tasks like writing emails or essays. And I think there's a lot of value in conducting academic tasks with Spanish, especially for heritage speakers who can use it at home but can't really write it formally. I think there's a huge value for them to use it in an academic environment. However, what I think we've done is completely deprioritize the interaction and prioritize these tasks, like you said, and we've completely lost the connection. So while there's a place for it, the priorities, I feel like, are completely out of whack. And I don't want to be disrespectful to the line of people, so whenever you want to cut me off.
How about we do two quick ones? Let's do Joe, then Art, and oh, sorry, let's go to Netta, then Joe, then Art, and then we'll move on.
No, I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry.
Better. Yeah.
I guess just to answer your question, I agree with what a lot of people have said so far about how it really depends on what your intention is. And if it's just, the desire to complete a task, then maybe learning the language isn't necessary. But then I think about things like poetry and how subjective language can be, and literature and just spontaneous interactions you might have with people, where if you're not actually learning the language, then you're not really opened up to all these different uses of language.
Cool. Joe and Arndt.
Yeah. Joe said his question was answered.
Yeah, I think my question was more or less covered.
Awesome, sorry.
Okay, I'll go real fast. Basically, just reflecting upon ChatGPT and other artificial intelligences that are emerging or will emerge in the future, I think that we'll still be interested in learning things with our inefficient and comparatively slow human brains, just because I think that it's fun. As much as kids maybe don't want to admit this because they're in school, I think that they inherently find learning things fun. It's why they like playing video games, is because the game challenges them to learn stuff. It's why I enjoy my studies, is when I'm not task oriented, as Marika said. I'm not just going in for this for a zero sum game. I'm actually enjoying all of the educational philosophy that I'm having to go through in the process of getting this degree. And then it's actually less work, and I actually intake more of the information anyway, and my brain changes, and it's fun to watch it change.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Art.
Let me, I'm going to add something quickly to the chat. Cummins writes about the ideas of BICS and CALP. BICS is basic interpersonal communication, and CALP is cognitive academic language proficiency. That seems to mirror your ideas of Gardner, Schramm, and Glisson's ideas of integrative and instrumental learning. So that might be something to sort of tack on later on as sort of a extending of what you've been talking about. Neil, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you guys for your interaction.
Netta, please feel free to go.
Okay. So I don't have a presentation, but let me just pull up my doc. So the project that I did was basically involving an interaction that happened with two students that I was observing. So it wasn't interviewing one student, it was just kind of like an incident that happened that involved the entire class, actually. And then that was followed up with classroom teachers and led to a broader discussion that was eventually kind of more resolved over time. And it's an incident that I've shared a few weeks ago, but I'll just say it again because many of you probably don't remember. But basically, oh, and I should also give a background. The school that I work in, it's an integrated 7th and 8th grade group. There's 54 students, and they all work in different pods that rotate between math, history, and English. And in some instances, I'm subbing in those classes, and in some instances, I'm observing. But on this particular day, I was subbing. And what happened is two students got into an argument about gender, and one of them identified as pansexual and used he, she, and they pronouns. So they kind of alternate their different pronouns and have like a very free sexual and gender expression. And then the other student was kind of challenging them on that, and just kind of sharing her beliefs that she thought conversations around gender were getting out of control and people are making things overly complicated. And it turned into this kind of like shouting match between the two. And her friend was kind of siding with her, saying, yeah, like, I'm tired of all this PC nonsense. Like, like biologically, there's just two sexes, two genders, and like everyone else is just trying to be cool. But then everyone else was arguing, saying, you all are going to get canceled. So, and then I, as the sub, was just trying to, get the focus back on the assignment. So what I said to them was, we need to have this conversation at another time. And I kind of like rushed to give some answers. I said, like, actually, biologically speaking, there's more than two sexes, and historically, people have expressed a wide range of genders. And I just kind of like ended it at that. And then I went to go speak to their classroom teachers, and I brought up what had happened. And my main concern was just kind of like the emotional well-being of this kid who identified as pansexual. Like, that was kind of like my instinct when I was jumping in to just kind of like sort of set the record straight. And the classroom teachers were very responsive to that, and they had a group discussion where they broke down gender, and students kind of shared out, like, what does it mean to be in the box with regard to gender? What does it mean to exist outside the box? And, kids could share their knowledge or their beliefs or their opinions about all these different issues and kind of just parse through it. And it's unclear to say if the students changed their opinions based on that conversation. But what I think was really important was they became aware of the language that they were using and how it was impacting other classmates. So the paper that I did was kind of interviewing the teachers after the fact to talk about how stereotypes are addressed more broadly in a range of scenarios throughout their teaching experience. And one shared with me that she tends to navigate it based on the identities of the people in her group. Like, if she feels like there is someone who's of an identity that's going to be impacted by a stereotype, she's more inclined to turn it into a class-wide discussion. And if, like, an impacted group is not present, then she's more inclined to like let it slide and just pick her battles with, the various things that adolescents say. And then the other teacher that I interviewed said it doesn't really matter to him, like, no matter what, like, if stereotypes are emerging in the class, like, he tries to make space to have a conversation so that students can like kind of just, get some new information and just like talk out their beliefs with one another. So I thought that was interesting. And then I kind of, for the rest of my paper, I grounded my research in an article, or it was actually a chapter from a book on stereotypes that was shared in the context of this class. And then I also found an article on Vygotsky. And I think as educators, we're mostly familiar with his theories regarding sociocultural learning, just kind of the idea that cognitive development happens in response to social interaction within, like our specific cultural context. And the article I found was specifically linking that idea to the idea of stereotypes and the importance of kind of like working opinions and beliefs out in a group setting. So yeah, I mean, I think I definitely learned a lot from that experience. And I think having gone through that entire arc, I probably wouldn't have been as quick to share information so quickly with students. I probably would have wanted to like actually ask them what they know about gender before just giving the answer. But I think I went into like a very protective mode where I just wanted to support that student in the moment. But I think like having been around teenagers more since then, I think that I think it would have been beneficial to kind of wait until there was an intentional time to really talk it out and give the floor to the students before giving them answers.
It's so interesting, because some of the things that we read in this class, like Claude Steele's book Whistling Vivaldi and about stereotype threat, it makes me think about like there's a sort of tendency to atomize and to put onto teachers. It's like, oh, here are problems like the idea that stereotypes can affect academic performance. And as our society becomes more and more diverse, and as we talk about more and more social issues, it seems or it feels like as a teacher, when you're in a classroom with students, you want to rectify all of these issues, especially when they're raised, because you sort of feel again, like Netta, like you said, protective. And then I wonder if it's like we're putting too much pressure on teachers, and maybe it might be easier if we say as a school-wide body, maybe we have a couple of assemblies where we talk about broader issues that, like any high school, especially students are exploring their sexuality and other issues. And it's like, why have it so like atomized to the individual classroom teacher? And maybe we should deal with it more broadly. I know Marika has a question. I know Netta, you can respond to that, or we can also go then to Marika or Joe.
Yeah, I definitely think that having class or school-wide, or just having a school-wide approach to addressing these issues is really important. And I think this particular school does, but I think they're also a really tight-knit community where these kinds of conversations are like sprouting up in classrooms all the time across age groups. So I think that's more just like kind of the culture of this particular environment. Marika?
I just wanted to say, oh my God, how horrible. I would be such a loss. But I think you did that so well. I mean, I think that student deserved you to stand there and help them.
Thanks.
Joe?
Joe?
Hey, yeah, I second what Marika just said. Also, just kind of reiterating something I wrote in the little board here, but just I think that one of the ways we can address this issue of like gender expression is that, especially in social studies programs, but not exclusively, we should just build more, lessons that incorporate it into, you know, how we understand the subject that we're studying. And I mean, for history teachers and social studies programs generally, there's great opportunity to roll in some anthropology into general lessons that, it doesn't, because I don't know, I often find that like relying on like having like a school-wide assembly, which, is a good thing to do. You want to actually have some moments when you're explicitly stating like, stereotypes are bad. Like I think sometimes that comes off like, oh, we have to have a special day talking about gender. Like actually we talk about gender all the time, we just don't realize it. And that's kind of what you want to, I don't know, I feel like we have to fight for better curriculums that way. Anyway, that's all.
Yeah, I agree that like the more we can weave it into the curriculum, the more a lot of these conversations get resolved on their own because students just have access to the information. Art?
Yeah, I second both what Joe and Marika were both saying, and also add that I think that you did the right thing in trying to protect the student while also still facilitating a dialogue. I think dialogue with these things is so, so, so important because, I mean, it goes back down to so many of the other things that we're supposed to incorporate, like the Danielson method and SEL. It always talks about having student voice and student choice and student dialogue being present at every stage of learning that you can possibly put it into. And especially with sometimes very divisive and controversial social issues like this, that's really, really crucial for the students to be able to kind of go through a process of self-discovery, because unfortunately, there are not a lot of other spaces in general society today where people who have different viewpoints can actually have a conversation with each other. That's not really the norm, politically speaking, in this country anymore, which is very sad. I think that creating spaces for civil discourse with a lot of guardrails to make sure that people feel safe when they go through that process is really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's also just a case for having the conversation at all. It's not just, oh, how can they learn more about this particular topic? It's like, how can they learn about engaging in civil discourse?
Netta, thank you so much. All right. Joe, you're more than welcome to share the screen whenever you're ready.
Sorry, I'm going to share it momentarily. I'm just going to go over some things first. So my presentation, my paper and my presentation are about comparing authoritarian versus authoritative teaching styles. And this came out of my the observation of a teacher. She will go by the name Miss Campbell. She teaches at the Dock Street School for STEAM Studies in the Dumbo neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. And she was very generous with her time. She demonstrated in the time that I observed her that she was very dedicated to her students. She was a wonderful coworker. Everyone liked her. And she was very passionate about social studies and teaching history. And these are always, I think, I want to say all this first because I'm going to be critiquing her a bit and I don't want to be unfair. You know, these qualities are really important in a middle school environment, especially because middle schoolers are a tough nut to crack. And they can be, you know, especially some of the ones I observed, can just be a little bit difficult to like deal with behaviorally. However, Ms. Campbell runs a very tight ship to kind of compensate for this. And when I say tight ship, like, so her students come in to class in the morning and every period, and they are expected from the moment they walk in to come in, sit at their desk, put their things away, meaning putting things under their desks, and then take out their notebook, and they have to begin working on the do now assignment right away. All this has to be done in silence. And there's no deviation allowed from this because if anything happens to deviate from this, if the students are too slow or whatever, Miss Campbell is, you know, just pretty much starts yelling at them. And she does this pretty much from the moment class starts to the moment class ends. And she's also determining in the moment as they come in who gets to sit where based on previous behavioral performance. And she splits people up who've been socializing. And she's very quick, again, to raise her voice and to be very critical at them. You know, she's not like screaming at them and calling them stupid, but it's just like, you know, she's yelling at them. And no question that there are students for whom this is fairly effective. They come in, they pretty much do their work, they do as they're told. However, the 4 periods I observed are split. The first 2 periods are general education, and the second 2 are split as ICT. So they're differentiated instruction with a co-teacher and often para-educators there as well for certain students. And those periods in particular really felt like a slog. She was yelling a lot more with them. And you know, again, to be fair, these are some of these kids have real behavioral issues, and they definitely push back. There was actually one girl named Kennedy who had a paraeducator who I think at this point had just given up. She just kind of shows up to just to kind of be there, but the woman didn't really want to deal with Kennedy at all, and Kennedy would act out and took up a lot of Mrs. Campbell's energy. And regardless, though, of who the style worked on and didn't work on, I can say with certainty in the 36 hours that I observed in Miss Campbell's class that the kids had checked out. They were not interested in being there. They were at best compliant, but at worst they were just like, I'm done, or totally defiant. You know, they were just like, I don't want to deal with you. Some of this, it should be noted, like the school itself emphasizes a kind of behavioral discipline model to achieve academic discipline. They also see themselves as prepping kids for college. This is an 8th grade program, this is a middle school program, but they advertise themselves that way. And they really push this idea that doing all this is going to get them ready for college prep, for a college mentality. They demand a lot of their students. So she kind of fits into that environment. And whether she does that because she feels she has to, or this is just like the thing she wants to do, I don't know. But that's where this all starts. So I want to go into my slideshow real quick. This is going to be pretty simple. Excuse me. Share screen. That's the one. All right. So just going to go through this real quick. I'm using authoritarian versus authoritative styles of teaching. This is actually based on excuse me, this is actually based on styles of parenting that came from a previous textbook that I used in another class. And the basic idea is that in a authoritarian class, the extent to which hold on, my own screen is sort of blocking my ability to view this. Okay, the extent to which teachers create clear expectations and rule, expect mature and responsible behavior, and require children and adolescents to comply with the willingness to confront disobedience. This defines a factor known as demandingness. The second factor involved in determining an authoritarian versus authoritative teaching style is responsiveness. And this is recognizing the adolescent as an individual and attuning to the adolescent's needs in an accepting and supporting manner. When these two things are combined, the degree to which they are combined, you get authoritarian versus authoritative styles. In an authoritarian teacher, which Ms. Campbell, I think, can be defined as, you demand a high standard of behavior and academic achievement, but do not allow for negotiation or pushback. So social emotional learning is typically de-emphasized here. There's not really like, this is kind of straightforward, like yells a lot, demands a lot, but she doesn't really want to hear about any deviation from the plan. Authoritative teachers, on the other hand, are both demanding and responsive. They recognizing the social emotional aspect of learning along with the need to set high standards for academics and behavior. And they set high standards because pro-social behavior is correlated with clearly communicated expectations for appropriate behavior. And what I also dipped into in my paper was an article that we had to read for class. Which one? It was by Tristan de Frontville, and it had to do. One thing that I actually identified from the article in my observation was that I think Miss Campbell, without saying it, she did sort of dance around it. She was trying to destroy or get rid of dead time. You know, this issue of like a disengagement from the material, and she really wanted to reduce that. In doing that, in getting these kids, forcing these kids to engage in the material, she was actually disengaging them in another way. And so what I recommended were some other options for doing that. And like, you still want to set high standards, but some other things that were recommended by de Frontville in the article were, instead of doing a normal do now, you do a brain teaser. And I think what they recommended was specifically you write like a statement on the board with grammar mistakes, and then you ask students to get into small groups and pick it all apart. Also physical activity warm-ups, which I actually think are just a good idea. There were instances where I was observing Miss Campbell's class where I was like, actually stretching or light exercise would do these kids some good. Like just stand up, yawn, stretch, jog in place for a second, whatever. It's kind of fun. And, finding something like that is actually useful. And then another thing, which I'm going to be promoting in my own social studies curriculums when I do them, is journaling, quick writing exercises, anything that gets kids to do some kind of like creative, independent thought, but also promotes metacognition, which we've been talking a little bit about in class recently. You want to get kids thinking about their own learning, and also I genuinely just think that it's good for kids to write things by hand and be able to observe their own handwriting if they can. Again, there's exceptions to this. You have to be careful about this one. There are people who have trouble doing that. But that's something that anyway, these are my sources. Yeah, that's kind of where that's it. That's my presentation. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I'll stop the share now. Okay.
Marika, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, Marika.
Oh yeah, I was curious. Is that a charter school?
No, it's with the DOE. I mean, they sent me. I didn't read anything about it being a charter school. So.
Oh, okay. I just hear that. I hear that more in charter schools. That strictness.
I mean, I wondered at first because I just thought like this seems like that environment, but Miss Campbell assured me they weren't a charter. So if I'm wrong, then I am wrong. But I was assigned them by the DOE, and I assumed it wasn't. Arndt.
This really seems to apply very well to basically special needs and inclusion, the inclusion class that I took over the summertime, where they speak specifically about how to provide effective differentiated instruction for kids with special needs, with learning disabilities, behavioral problems, you name it, basically. And I've seen a couple of different teachers who are paraprofessionals and a couple of people who actually do this for a living. And some of them are extremely chilled out. Like it doesn't matter what the kids do. If they yell and scream and writhe on the floor, this teacher just does not react because they know that that's exactly what they want the teacher to do. And then other teachers do more like what Mrs. Campbell would do, where they're completely traditional authoritarian. They yell a lot. And I hate to say it, maybe some of it might be it like some methods will work for some kids better than others, but you are right in that I think that you end up kind of killing a part of what should be a growing situation. An opportunity for mental growth is basically just completely shut down, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny, I don't want to take up too much more time here, but like the other night, I don't know who else is in a certain class with me. Actually, I was in a graduate level course. We experienced a teacher who was being kind of a jerk, and everybody agreed that I spoke with afterwards was very like put off by his attitude. And what was really tragic about it was that we had all read a book that we actually for class that we all actually really enjoyed, and there was a real sense like we wanted to come in and talk about it. And then after that, now I think a lot of people feel like it's like a class they really dislike, and we're people in our who are adults, and I volunteer to be in that class. I choose to be there, but eighth graders have no choice to be in school, and you know they're going to react in some resistive way. They just are, and especially if you just completely turn them off. And I mean, some of those kids, at moments, I'm not gonna lie, like I sympathized with Miss Campbell. Like there were moments when there was no justification for the ways they were acting, but I mean, as an overall thing, I mean, it was very clear none of them really wanted to be there, and it kind of sucks. Like you should kind of want to be in school a little bit. So
Yeah, I was laughing because I was imagining in my mind like a work environment or like some kind of professional hierarchical environment where like if you don't feel like it, you just get yelled at. You don't feel like doing exactly what you're supposed to do, somebody will just scream at you, and it's just like it's just so insane. It's so insane once you've like experienced something better. And I know like teachers will look at those kind of teachers will kind of like look down on other methods, be like, oh, you're showing weakness or whatever. But it's like you have to be able to like set expectations for people without screaming at them. It's a must.
definitely true. I think I don't know, Professor, you let me know, but I think that's all I've got. And I don't know if there's anyone else with any questions, but
Awesome. Well, let me say a couple quick things. It's interesting. Like the idea of Deborah Britzman talks about authoritative discourse, like teacher discourse, and internally persuasive student discourse. And it sounds like there's so little. And I wonder if Miss Campbell, her strategies and tactics in class pivot depending on the class. Maybe she has a very uproarious class, so she's much more authoritative in her discourse, less so with other ones. But what you're saying, I wouldn't think. It feels like she has a very static set of tactics. I don't know that. Like it might be a feel that you'd have to find. And then I wonder about
definitely
that. Go ahead.
it's definitely more effective with the gen ed students. Like I do point out in my paper that like they tend to be more responsive and they get a lot more work done. But like with the ICT class, no.
And it's interesting too. Like I know we don't read a lot of French philosophy in class, but it's interesting. Like the idea of Foucault and his and discipline and punish and panopticons. It's interesting where there's this sort of surveillance capitalism culture around us that swirls around us, and it almost permeates in our classes, not only through our technology but also in our teaching techniques. And it's weird that sort of contrast with Kunitz, and it's his idea of with itness, and it's the idea of a teacher sort of knowing something's going on. But I think what Kunitz will do instead, it's like you won't necessarily exert your authority in all situations, but it's kind of like you show students, I know what's going on. I'm not always gonna go to like a high level of student oppression through my authoritative discourse, and I'll let you get around. And I wonder, in terms of like more motivation issues, when you have these external motivators where Ms. Campbell can be very strong, longer term, you want to scaffold away from that and have students being more internally motivated. And I wonder if over the course of the year, say on the y-axis, this is oppressive and authoritative discourse, and ideally it sort of cascades down gently over the course of the year so that they kind of internalize their own ways to motivate themselves. So I don't know. A lot of things to think about. Like it's really interesting. I'm sure you've seen a lot of things that are quite interesting in that class.
Yeah, if you.
Rika, thanks, Joe. Rika.
Okay, so let me see if I can get this. So I hit share screen first.
Yeah.
Is that yeah? Okay. 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 So there we go. Okay. So can everyone see this? No. No one can
Hit it again, and then press on the actual whatever the thing that's highlighted.
So press screen share again.
Yes, press yeah, share screen. It's the green upward arrow. And then after hitting that, then press on the window that you're selecting. Yeah, that now, yeah. Awesome.
You see it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now let me see if I can actually do this. Okay. So this is the John F. Kennedy campus, where I have been doing my field work. I don't know if anyone knows of this high school. It was formerly, JFK High School in Marble Hill in the Bronx. It was it's a huge high school, but it's now 7 different schools. And the school I have been doing my field work at is the Bronx School of Law and Finance. This is a nice picture of it. See, they have a very nice playing field. Apparently, the athletic teams are like really good. They're dominating. So this is JFK. It is, but my school where I've been observing a Latin class is this one. Okay, so I just got this from Great Schools. The DOE website doesn't have really much stuff. Oops, because of COVID, they don't have many statistics. But anyway, you can see the you can see that the scores are pretty low for this school, but they do have Latin because of the law aspect of the school organization. It's been a school since 2006, I think, 2006, 2003. But yeah, not a great school. But while I was there, there's one Latin teacher, and Latin is mandatory. So she sees every student that goes into that high school, which is about 300 altogether. She sees as freshmen. They have to take 1 year. Some of them take 2 years, and they don't really have a choice. They're put in that second year of Latin, whether they like it or not. Some do want to through the 3rd year and then take the regents, but not very many. So I saw, all 3 years. She has 5 classes, 3 first years, 1 second year class, and a 3rd year class. And so I did my lesson profile on one of the students in the 1st year class, a freshman, and I gave him the name Bashir because I thought I wouldn't use his real name. And the reason I decided to do my profile on Bashir is that he was the first student who actually asked for my help. And so it became a regular thing to sit with Bashir and help him do his work. And apparently he would not do work. Like at once I regularly sat with him, and the teacher told me, unless you're here, he does not do work, and he hasn't been doing work all year. So, and in fact, I went a week between, seeing him, and the page he pulled out of the handout was on the exact same word where we had stopped the week before. So but he still accepted my help, was responsive when when I'd wake him up and say, okay, let's start working. And so I said, oh, can I interview you? And he agreed. He speaks extremely softly. So it was difficult, and he's a boy of few words. So it was not, he didn't elaborate much. I had to really drag information out of him. But he lives in 170 in the Bronx, 170 the Grand Concourse in the Bronx. And he lives with his parents and two older sisters, like 20 and 22. So he right now is 14. He wears a mask all the time. He is the only student in the school who wears a mask. He does not interact with any of his classmates. He is extremely apathetic towards all his classwork. His teacher, the Latin teacher, told me that he does not do work in his other classes, to the point where now they actually have decided they should make an intervention, and they tried to get his parents on board, but they were not responsive, I guess, when the school called to try to get to find out, if he needed some help or maybe an assessment. So it just from my own experience, I realized, gosh, this poor kid, he went into middle school at the beginning, like in 2019. So 2020, he was, they went into lockdown, and he spent COVID at home with his parents and two older sisters, and he did schoolwork by his laptop, but he was very isolated. And apparently when he did, middle school opened back up, there's a kid there from the same middle school who's now a freshman at Law and Finance, and he said he was the same way. Like he doesn't interact. He's just very withdrawn. And so it just occurred to me that he may really be suffering some mental health effects from the COVID lockdown, and so I just I just looked into some stats. So let's see. Oh, here we go. This is a scary one. So this is adverse childhood experiences during the pandemic. Okay, he didn't know, no one in his family died or got sick, or even he didn't have COVID. No one in his family had COVID. He doesn't know anyone who had COVID, or at least no one who died from COVID. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of there are a lot of consequences, the COVID and the lockdown. And there's this, oh, wrong one. All right, here we go. This is scary. When you look at this, 9% of adolescents attempted suicide in the preceding year. So 20 to 21. And almost 20% considering suicide. This is from the CDC. And then so in New York City, there was another article that had a data they pulled a lot of data from New York City ERs, and these are hospital visits during the different, they identified 5 different waves of COVID. And, you can see, there's the, what would be the dotted line is just like like maybe a normal, right? And then, you can see certain groups show a real increase. You can see obviously the Asian American adolescents were like, that's very noticeable. There was some speculation that might have been because of the anti-Asian sentiment around at that time, but I'm not sure, but that it didn't pursue why that would be. But then what I thought was very interesting is when you look at the COI is Child Opportunity Index. So when you look at this, you see the children who were in I'm assuming very high COI. Maybe they had a lot of buffer from the effects of a COVID lockdown, but definitely high COI neighborhoods. This is broken down by neighborhoods. Lots of hospital visits, right? Moderate, low, and very low. So like what you can see there, it's hard to imagine that, oh yes, children in these, low COI zip codes weren't suffering, right? It's just that as the article said, there are barriers to getting help. It took, if children were suffering mental health problems, there was such a backlog. It took a lot of parental involvement and determination to get kids help. So I think, I don't, it's probably a huge leap, but I wonder whether Bashir is suffering from, depression, anxiety from COVID lockdown. But yeah, so that was what I hope, I'm hoping for the best for him. They've decided to move him to smaller classes to try to help him have more opportunities for interacting with his classmates and get more attention from his teachers. So his Latin teacher said that she actually saw him give one of the other freshmen in the Latin class like a high five last week, which she was just like, she was shocked and hopeful. And I was like, oh yeah, great. And that's it. Does anybody have, I don't know if anybody else has any similar views on the effects of COVID. I don't know how to close this. Let's see.
I think just go up to the top and it's stop share.
Stop share. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. So that's my presentation.
I think Netta, then Neil.
I definitely feel like I'm constantly observing students with the lens of COVID and wondering, as a first-time observer of adolescents, wondering what aspects of their behavior are just part of normal developmental milestones and what is related to COVID. And it's a conversation I have with their group teachers all the time, and it feels like a little bit too soon to say anything conclusive, but it's definitely always on my mind. And then for them, since they have much more experience than me and have a little more insight of what's normal and what's not, they've shared their observations as well.
Yeah, it's I think they're just starting to try to put together data about adolescent mental health from this period. I guess comparing it to previous periods or as time passes, and I guess we'll find out more.
Neil.
Thanks for the information. I cannot wrap my head around the 9% have attempted suicide rate. That just is, I couldn't even believe that, like, until you said it was the CDC. Like that to me, I thought that was a typo. That's extremely scary.
Yeah, it
And
was, I was shocked. I was like, there's no way. But when you think about it, actually, kids do try, and no one, unless they're injured enough to need medical attention, it's possible it may be hidden. Like, kids can try it and no one knows, you know?
yeah, like 20%, like you said, or it was 19.4 or 20% had said they had seriously contemplated it, which is extremely high, but like I could believe that. But like 1 out of every 10 kids attempting suicide, like I can't even believe, like that's unbelievable to me.
Yeah, it's
So
interesting.
thank you
I
for sharing
talked
those numbers.
I talked
What?
to an administrator of a K to 12 school, and she was just talking about the idea of, students have these routines of being in fixed locations and having a routine that's school related about being somewhere, and behaving in a certain way. And then when you take that scaffolding that slowly builds over time in terms of just how to coexist with other people, and you take that away for a year, and how that can just completely disrupt a number of patterns. And it's like Netta said, you don't really, we see some short term implications of that, but the long term, that'll be really interesting to see how that turns out. No, and obviously we all hope that some of these numbers that Marika shared, which are highly disturbing, hopefully they taper down. We're rapidly running out of time. We have 3 people left, so I'm going to try to keep you to the 10-minute mark for everyone, and then I will definitely be staying past 6:50. So you'll have at least an audience of 1. And but people can say that's great if they can. I completely understand. Ian, you're next, sir. Good sir.
Okay, guys. I do have a PowerPoint. Let me bring it up.
Thanks for everyone's questions. I hate to stifle the conversation, and we could talk for a long time about almost every one of these presentations. So that's a testament to your work.
All right. So, all right, from the top. All right. So my paper was about basically an observation that I made of 2 students who showed kind of these 2 things in a way that I was able to like identify these conceptual things that were familiar from class. Um, and I just kind of saw them in action and made note of them. This is an observation. I didn't like interact or interview with these students, but they were like literally behaving like this less than 10 feet away from me. So I thought, it's worth keeping in mind that it's like they it's interesting that they did certain things in my presence. So real quick, so these are the first letters of these students' names. Jay, he conforms to classroom etiquette. He raises his hand. He participates like out loud and doing the activities. He's good at this physics class. Um, Side note, I am currently a chem teaching candidate, but someday I'd like to do dual certification, so I observe both. So yes, Jay, good physics student, knows what he's doing. He also, this is metacognition, he demonstrated awareness of his learning process. So I'll get into that on the next slide, but he also was like teaching his table mates. They were asking stuff. He was, helping tweak that for them. Student L he sort of is a lot more brazen, a lot more like blasé about his behavior. He's ignoring these etiquette things that Jay is doing. And this is a classroom of about 30 people. So these 2 guys are like sat near the back where I'm sitting observing. And but they're at different tables. Um, they like Jay's table are loosely like to consistently performing like the activities basically as the teacher would have in an ideal classroom. Whereas L and his table mates are essentially the opposite. They're goofing around. They're like, um, like L himself would like shout and like he said like holy shit, because he got a text from his dad, which A, why are you swearing out loud in front of everybody? B, why are you like just openly being like, yes, I'm on my phone right now? It was very interesting. Anyway, but the thing is, he like is good at the class as well. So, I'll try to speed this up. So he is like, um, doing, he's doing the work, but he's also like goofing off to show off for his table mates. But he's also like kind of the leader, kind of the clown of that table. So it's a very unique, interesting dynamic. So metacognition, this is purely Jay's realm, right? He has such a command of his own learning. He even described the cause and effect relationship of like how he did a review exercise to like doing better on the test than even he normally does, which was probably like in the 90s. He probably got upper 90s on this particular test, if I were to hazard a guess. But also, in order to teach your table mates, you have to have like a recognition of the concepts that is deeper than just like your one way of getting through the task. He was able to like I say here in the slides, like deconstruct and rephrase and reframe like the lesson for his table mates who weren't like getting it the way that the teacher was lecturing it. So I thought that was pretty great. Definitely admirable, cool stuff, and definitely touches on this like metacognition thing, which constantly comes up in education. So last thing is, um, this has come up like both semesters I've been in the program so far, is this zone of proximal development. This is another Vygotsky um, uh, 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 topic. Sorry. So this is like, you guys know, this is the zone where we push students to like go just half step beyond their current capability. Um, I think student L is a good case study for this because he is capable of doing this stuff on his own, but he's so social and he's so like he's distracted enough where it's like he couldn't do this in a vacuum, but he is in the zone of proximal development. Like he has people around him who are going to push, like to close that gap where, like whereas like Jay alone, he could probably do this in his sleep, but the fact that L is like he actually is going over and reaching out to Jay and being like, "Hey, dude, like, is this how you do this one?" And they're like, "Yeah," and then they're talking about ideas briefly, and then L goes back and is distracted, and so I don't know. I was like, I kind of came to one realization where it's like adolescent boys are really invested in looking cool and they have their like value system of like, I don't want to be seen to be trying hard in class, which might be the case for L, but he still is good at school. He just doesn't want people to know that he cares. Um, something like that. So, um, that and, like these two more academic takeaways. Um, that's all I got. So, um, thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Ian. Does anyone have any quick reflections based on what Ian said? Aren't?
Can everybody hear me okay? I switched devices over here.
Yeah.
I found that really fascinating, and it's a dynamic that I see playing out all the time. Are kids that they're extremely social, and you put them in a room full of other people that are roughly the same age as them, and all they want to do is talk about anything and everything except for what the teacher is trying to teach them at that moment. They want to talk about the stars in the universe. They want to talk about literally anything, what they're going to do after school that day, anything. But the fact that L still tries to circle back and engage with the material is still something that's really interesting to me. And I would dare say that it actually demonstrates a level of metacognition within L as well, not just J.
Yeah, that is interesting where it's like he's aware enough of the fact that this task is necessary that he would rather do it during class time than do it at home or something like that, or he would rather do enough to get the points now than do it or then get a 0 or something, is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, his priority is to talk with his friends. But if he has like a spare 20% of his attention span, he'll use that towards the class, which I've witnessed many students who are like that, who are so smart. And if they gave 100% of their energy, they would be A+ students. But because that's just their personality, they only want to give 20 or 30% of their energy. And they figure, oh, yeah, well, I'll get a C+. That's good enough.
Not being seen to be trying is like, I think a lot of students would rather be seen to like not care but get like okay grades rather than be seen as a tryhard and get excellent grades. So
Yeah, yeah. But just out of curiosity, what age range was this?
these were so L is a senior and J is a junior. I think physics most of the time here is physics senior. I like am from out of state originally. So but yeah, Jay's a junior. I think he's a year ahead in science. And so that's like kind of adds another layer to the dynamic where it's like, yeah, he probably in his value system has like taken on being an academic guy as like part of that identity and he's more comfortable with that than like L might be, for example, where he's still like he again not wanting to be seen as a nerd or what have you.
I see. So they're both actually the same age. It was just that Jay is a year ahead in science. Is that right?
Yes, he's a junior, L's a senior.
Oh, oh, wait a minute. One is a senior
They're
and
two
one is a
different grades.
junior. Oh, so they're not the same age then.
Sorry, yes, I thought you
Oh,
meant like
okay.
numerically.
Oh, right, right, right. I see. Yeah, that's really interesting. Most classes that I've observed, they always have the same age range, the same grade. There's not a lot of like cross leveling between ages.
Yeah, I think he must have skipped, at least in this subject area, you can skip a year. At the school that I observed this at, they have a fast track for students who want to, they do living environment in 8th, chem 9th, um, something else 10th, and then you can do whatever, after that. So that's my understanding, at least.
Marika, do you have something you want to?
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, the the personality of L is funny. I guess he's a senior just trying to finish up before he graduates. And Jay is like seriously into this subject. Jay is patient apparently with L, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's funny, like they're like basically back to back at their two tables, and then we got the focus table here and the distracted table over here. And I was like, hey dude, like what's up with this? So yeah, he's like, and he's like 80% of the way there. So it's not like Ella's like asking him to like, lift him up from nothing. He's just like bouncing off ideas to close that knowledge gap between like what he already knows and what's being asked. So I thought that was cool.
Ian, yeah, just really briefly. It's interesting when you talked about these things. It's almost like, in terms of J and L's interaction, it made me think about it's James Paul G writes. He's writing a lot more specifically about literacy, but then he's more worked in video game development and about how video games sort of embraces the zone of proximal development where they're not super hard when you begin, but become progressively harder. So it's kind of like mimics the idea of ideal ZPD. But when you talked about their relationship, it made me think about this idea in this posturing to look cool. G, when he talks about language and literacy, he talks about this contrast between mastery and acquisition. And mastery is just like the simple example is someone who just learned, say, a sport. They when they're a kid and they just kind of played it all the time, and they don't really know why they're so good, but they just did it for such a long time that they can't look at it after the fact. because they just are like, oh, I'm just great. That's just what I've just done this the whole time. Versus the person, it would be like the journeyman or journeywoman player who was never that good, but purely through learning about how to be good at that thing became decently well. And so it's like you almost want to exhibit mastery, which is almost this effortless ability to be great at something versus the hard labor of acquisition. And it's like in a K-12 environment, you want to show, hey, I just happen to be good at this, and I don't really want to go behind the magician's curtain and versus the acquisition where you don't want to show everyone that you're laboring constantly because it's just not cool. And it's interesting how that manifests itself in this kind of performativity that may not be really true of what's actually happening internally and at home. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm also in like the literacy class here this semester, so that's like right on the money with like what we've read in that class too. So
yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Zachary, Ian, thank you so much. Zachary, do you want to do yours, and then we have Arn to finish?
Can you see my screen? Yeah, right. So I like had already sort of begun like sort of field work and like learning log stuff from like way the beginning, right? So I uh ended up like writing a profile, right, of the Bronx Science High School Social Studies Department. But like tried, yeah, sort of like as my exercise. Yeah, so like, and trying to do the task of like relating it to things from the class, right? And like, sort of in this case, like to frame the paper I wrote, like I talked about the social studies department, because really, I go there and not, usually like 5 hours a week for one day, like 5 hours one day a week, and see like, I guess, probably 6 or 7 different teachers. So like sort of seeing and then at the end of it, go back to their lounge to meet with like the main department head, who's the one who signs my form. Okay, so in that context, right, like I could, you can see how, well, already like from there, all of the social studies classes at the school are like located on this one hallway. It's the same hallway that like the department has its office on. So this, physical proximity, it fosters idea exchange. Like my brother-in-law went to this school like decades ago, right? He's like, a couple years younger than me, and like he remembered, oh yeah, like the third floor, right? When I mentioned I was observing there. So, yeah, like and definitely like there, I see these uniform practices, right? The writing aim, of the lesson on the board. There's like one teacher who does grapple points. Like I think that's his thing. Another person does learning target, which I think is a branded thing from learning expeditionary learning. But other than like those, crazies who just have fancy ways of doing it, right? Like this is like everyone's, has the same concept of what a lesson is, I think. That's something I'll talk about a little bit in a moment. And yeah, of course, it probably reflects broader community practices in education than just like the school. But I'm going to talk about other things that they like do as a department in a moment. But like to sort of focus on one thing that like caught my eye. And, I think all of the people I observe, except for like one guy who's like older. He also used to be a professor. Before, like, so all of the younger people, right, do this sort of contemporary, so-called like maybe, I don't know if they would use the word, but backwards approach, like learner-centered, skill-based goals. And like this older guy, like I think, he doesn't do nows most of the time. I don't think I've ever seen him do a do now. Like sometimes he just lectures the whole class, although like he does sometimes do activities. So I just sort of like what stuck out to me one day, and that like I think overall, like thinking about the lesson planning classes, like other classes, like I could sort of see myself and like in what he was doing in terms of how I used to teach classes before I really knew anything about like how to teach classes. So like this is a typical time with this guy, right? This was something that didn't make into the body of my paper, but like uh right, like the start of class, he reviews the previous material and sort of transitions to the topic. He then on his best days, right, there's a think, pair, share activity where they might turn and have a guided, to each other and read a quick text or discuss something, review thing. Which he'll then sort of guide discussion in a certain direction that's clear. He wants to get a certain way, and then he'll lecture. And previous, like before class, like he's pre-written like notes on the board, including an aim, right? Even he has like an aim. But he never has a PowerPoint or anything. He uses the projector to like block the pre-written notes, and then like he'll pull it up and like, so that everyone can't just write it and tune out, he says. Yeah, and like on the best of days, like he'll have, group work for 10 minutes, maybe, and then he'll get back to the lecture and sort of review the group work and keep going. Then he'll end like having sort of accomplished the aim and previewing the next class topic. Yeah, I mean, this is something sort of from my research for the academic paper, but right, like the sort of difference between I think planning a lesson from the desired outcome in terms of skills and thinking, I don't know. Well, yeah, I don't think I have time for that. But so just even with this person, right? Like thinking about him and the department as a community of practice, right? Like even he, right? He generally has these active learning elements in traditional lectures. Although not every day, but he does always have this clear aim. Although I had sort of associated, when I wrote this, I had associated that with backwards learning and or design in general. But the lesson planning teacher told me the other night that aim and sort of the motivation elicits aim approach was older than predated backwards design. So like maybe I'm confused about what to call what. Right, and yeah, I mentioned his like what he does with the PowerPoint, and like even when he does have those activities, I think the way he thinks of it, like, or he described it to me in times I spoke to him, and it's the same way I would have described it, a year, well, I guess 2 years ago or 3 years ago, or even when I was probably doing undergraduate stuff, right? Like, well, not entirely, like this idea of breaking things up or giving people something to do, like, but like the main thing you're thinking about is the content. So anyway, like moving on from that one guide to just sort of like things, the school is the community of practice, and like things I've observed that were interesting to me that I was trying to relate to stuff from class, was that like I was definitely always, as first doing undergraduates and like the 3 years I taught high school, I would make a point of like giving people my PowerPoints ahead of time, but like you can take the notes on it, or like you don't have to ever worry about just getting something down if it's there. And it's like a norm throughout this department, right? Like a a solid norm that everyone is doing their notes by hand. And I talked in the paper about how that kind of enhances memory and engagement, right? Sort of in terms of moving information from short term to longer term memory, and do this sort of practice by doing approach. It's definitely not like the kind of deeper repetition through learning and higher uses that like Orlin was talking about getting people to. But I guess in theory, like good old fashioned handwriting might be one of those steps to getting to higher uses. I thought about metacognition a lot. It's one of the more useful buzzwords we've encountered in our classes, including this one. And I definitely have seen that a lot, although a lot of people have mentioned it too, like, unless they were like from teachers college like a year ago, like no one like stared at me blank when I used the word metacognition. People definitely, do things like you know, right, name, and they're teaching active reading comprehension strategies before, during, and after reading, you know, and they're sort of naming the fact that they're doing this, right? Like, for example, like naming the strategy happy for document analysis. And, you know, say, one thing I saw that was really, wait, like one day I was there. Can you wait? Can you see this tweet thing? Did I change? Okay, yeah. Like one day I went in. So this guy was did this whole, you know, very quick. You know, you guys all stunk at critical analysis on the last DBQ. Like, let's do happy again. And like just this one sentence tweet, right? He displayed. He didn't. I wish Taylor Swift was in love with a climate scientist, right? You know, number of uh yeah, views, right, being 3 million, right, October 5th, and like just go, and like the whole room, like everyone was buzzing and talking, and like, I mean, generally there's like always active involvement from the kids at this school. Like I think they're able to do things that, you know, other people wouldn't necessarily, but right, it's this sort of applying use of routine strategies to novel sources, you know, modeling, reading, and analysis with the think aloud technique, and sort of, you know, going from there, right? Go explicit training and teacher modeling, like through naming strategies, moving on to guided practice, independent practice, and this kind of debriefing. Yeah, that like general like metacognitive, pro-metacognitive structure was something I encountered a lot. Anyway, so those are the things I like related what I've been seeing in fieldwork too in my paper. Yeah, sorry if I went over.
No problem. Any questions, friends? Like it's interesting when you talk about the backwards approach. It makes me think about Wiggins and McTighe and the idea of UBD frameworks. And it's interesting where you have like these, I don't want to say they're like, it's like a dialectical thing where it's like a forward approach and a backwards approach. And I wonder, it's like we have these sort of themes that come up in fads in education, and it's like you almost toggle back and forth. And it sounds from the way that this department works is that there's people that do more UBD, like backwards design, some that do more forwards design, but it seems like they coexist relatively well. And it's interesting where, how do you bring in new ideas that don't threaten people, antagonize people, but help them maybe, oh yeah, I do UBD, maybe I should do some forward approach. Oh, I do forward approach. How do I do some UBD and see how I can kind of marry and meld various themes? Like, again, like you said, we would talk a lot here at Hunter about themes like metacognition, but it seems like in other places it's completely foreign to them. So how do you introduce new concepts? Awesome. And please use the chat, friends, if you have any more. And then finally, let's go to Arndt.
Okay, can everybody see and hear me? If you have to go, just go. I won't take it personally. If I end up making this presentation just for like 1 or 2 people, then I'm totally fine with that.
Sorry, Arndt, I have to go. This is Marika.
All good. Have a good night. And that goes for anybody else. You don't, you know, you can do what they call the Irish goodbye, which is you don't actually have to say goodbye. You can just go. All right. So now I'm going to try and do a screen share. Let's see here. Share screen, desktop, share. Okay. Can everybody see my screen right now? Was that a thumbs up? Sorry. Yes, that was a thumbs up. Okay. So there we go. Okay. Basically, my page is titled Nigel. That's not his real name. I changed his name for privacy purposes. I basically started observing on pretty much the first day of school. I decided to go in as early as I could to try to knock out as many hours as I could, as fast as I could. And also, I was really interested in classroom management. This is basically all the stuff that I couldn't fit into the paper because I had to make it 1,000 words or less. So I had to cut a lot of stuff. And I'm interested in classroom management because it's one of the things that I feel like wasn't talked a lot about, at least so far, in a lot of my grad school programs that I've been taking so far. And I wanted to see the ship get built, so to speak. The teacher that I was observing under uses a lot of nautical references, which I like because I used to be a sailor a long time ago. And he was like, yeah, you know, when you're teaching a class and you're trying to teach exact content and you have content goals that you need the kids to learn, that's like you're asking them to pilot the ship to a certain destination. But at the very beginning of school, when everybody's just getting to know each other and all the routines are being established, you're still building the ship. So this is Ridgewood, Queens. This is the neighborhood that I was observing in. The view from the school is pretty much like that. The classroom was on the 4th floor. It's actually a really nice view. That's the school. That's IS 77. I would ride my bike to there every morning. And in my paper, I basically relate what happened when I was observing these classes. It would be a huge auditorium full of like maybe 70 to 80 kids, basically all of the 6th graders, all of the 7th graders, all of the 8th graders. They would come in and they would get to choose what arts class they would get to do for the rest of the year. They got to choose drama or tech, which is like the tech arts, like building websites and things like that. Music, the band program, which is what I was observing for because I'm here to be a music education major. And the last one was chorus, singing. And they had these things explained to them, and then they got an iPad to fill out a survey and decide what they wanted to do. This one student, Nigel, who stood out from the rest, he literally never stood still. He was always running around, always jumping, always seeking to be the center of attention at any given time. And he was really, really hard to control. And over again, I saw a dynamic play out where the teacher that I was observing under, Mr. C, would basically calmly ask Nigel to go out into the hallway with him, and he would have a private chat with him. And then however long that chat took, sometimes it would be 5 minutes, sometimes it would be 10 minutes, never longer than 10 minutes. He would come back, and then Nigel would start behaving. Nigel would sit down. He would, if there was work being done in the classroom at that time, he would start doing it. He would stop the behavior that had caused the teacher to bring him out into the classroom. Usually it would be really loud and disruptive behavior, like singing at the top of his lungs and dancing really well. I have to say, the kid's a really good dancer, but putting on a show, the kid wants to be on Broadway or something like that. He has a lot of talent. He can really sing, he can really dance. But you know, he obviously has a lot of trouble staying focused and controlling himself. I think he has a lot of impulsive behavior. And also he has a lot of trouble basically respecting the time of fellow classmates. He doesn't spend a lot of time thinking about that, about how his actions and how his noise, basically his disruption, will maybe not be 100% respectful for other people in the room. But every time, I mean, I think that every time that these conversations out in the hallway would happen between the teacher and Nigel is when that would happen. So basically, I tied it to Freire, or Freire. I always mispronounce his name. But he talked about dialogue-based education versus banking method of education, and about critical education. When Mr. C, I call him, I changed the name of the teacher as well, just for extra privacy. He would do a lot of things. He would say things like, look, let me be real with you guys, okay? I realize that some of you don't want to be here, but this is what we have to do right now. You chose band, this is band class. This is what it is. He was always, he allowed the kids to have a certain amount of criticality and some feedback about what they were learning and how they were learning it. But at the same time, he didn't change his standards. The standards were the same. He wanted them to learn how to play their musical instruments. He wanted them to pass a safety test before they got a musical instrument. Those things never changed. The other thing is that Freire talked about the banking concept of education. And I found that really interesting because Freire talked about it like that's the traditional method of education where you input knowledge into the kids and then you ask them to spit it out again, basically. But I viewed it as like, you know, this teacher that I was observing under, he was using the banking method too, but in a completely different way. He was banking a relationship with this student. He was leveraging his relationship with the student for the student's willingness to actually willingly follow him out into the hallway and have a conversation with him about his behavior, about the standards of the class versus his behavior and where the gap was at. Again, this is all based on supposition and based on a summary of what the teacher said was said in the hallway, because the nature of those conversations is that they have to be private. They can't have an observer. It's a little bit like quantum mechanics in that I think that having an observer there will change the nature of the conversation. And so that's why they had to be private. So anyway, I thought about the banking method with regards to relationships with the students and how you get a rapport and how you get a relationship with the student to get them motivated to want to listen to you. Even if they don't like what you're saying, they want to listen to you because you're not their friend exactly, but they know that you care about them. This teacher was very, very good about making a point every single class to every single group of kids, grade 6, grade 7, and grade 8. This is a middle school, by the way. He literally told them that, look, I love you guys and I want you to succeed. Maybe in some school cultures, it would not be okay to tell kids that you love them. But he was always careful to say, like, as your teacher, I love you and I want you to succeed. The other idea that I tied this to was Price Mitchell and metacognition, because I have a feeling that this is way more present throughout education than we even think about. And I think that, again, I don't know that he did this when he was having conversations with Nigel out in the hallway, but I have a feeling that the teacher would ask questions to try to stimulate metacognition in the student. He would ask questions like, well, what do you think we're trying to do here today? Was your singing and dancing in front of the class helpful for everybody trying to do their work or non-helpful? Why would that not be helpful? What could we do to meet the goals that we have here? Anyway, I think that was really interesting. And I've probably talked enough right now. So I'm going to pose some questions to the class or to whoever is still here. Let's start with the first one. How would you, as a teacher, have approached Nigel? What would you have done the same and what would you have done different? I'll let that sink in for a few seconds.
Like it sounds like Mr. C has a really like intimate in a good way, intimate, like a professional, intimate relationship with Nigel. And I wonder, like, again, you go to the idea of classroom management about how else you could handle that other than do it the way that he does. Because once it's like you said, that you had that idea of quantum mechanics. It's like once you foreground that relationship in a public setting, then it's going to change the dynamics of it. And it sounds like Mr. C, I think, knows the behavioral issues that Nigel's dealing with. And I think he sort of maybe intuited, or I don't know, because obviously I'm not in that class, but the best way to manage that relationship and is to take him out of the classroom privately to discuss those issues, and that seems to work for him. So like that seems to me like I'd want to concur with Mr. C's judgment. I don't think I'd do anything different, but I'd worry about the rest of the class and managing them when you're outside the class.
Yes, this was an issue sometimes where I would be left alone with about 25 other 7th graders sometimes when this happened. That's not what is supposed to happen. Anybody who's listening, don't tell anyone that happened, because I think Mr. C was literally told that he's responsible for me as an observer in the school and he can't let me out of his sight for liability reasons. Nothing happened. The kids just kept on blatting away on their instruments, and that's kind of what they were doing. Whenever there was free space within the lesson, they were allowed to just practice their instruments, learn how to play the trombone, experiment with making noises on their clarinets, on the various instruments that they were playing on. Here's another question. How would you measure successful engagement with a student that you teach from a management perspective, or with a student that is difficult to teach from a management perspective? Is merely getting compliance enough, or do you need them to actually like engage with the material? This is a question that I've had quite.
It's a really good question. Like I just it I don't know. I don't. It's a question that's like making me realize how little I know, like how to answer it. But I want I want to like acknowledge I'm here and like they're good questions. I just don't know. Like, and like I can't imagine doing. I don't know. That's like that takes something of the teacher. Like even forgetting like that responsibility thing. Like to like put in that kind of emotional one-on-one. I guess I don't know. But I guess that's what's required. It's like that. It just takes so much.
Yeah, that
Sorry,
is a
that
good
wasn't a
point.
finished thought. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. That's all good. That is a good point, because this teacher teaches hundreds of kids, but that's the only student that he does that with. That's the only student that he'll take time out of his class, interrupt the whole class, and go out and talk with him in the hallway. I'm not saying that's necessarily the right thing to do. That's just what he does. That seems to work for him in that situation.
I wonder, like maybe again, maybe this goes back to Joe's presentation about the authoritarian classroom versus authoritative and demandingness, and various other measures. I wonder if you like sort of over time, it's like you say, it's you because maybe Nigel is so hard to, he has so much energy, so much kinetic energy, and he's like a tactile learner. Maybe initially you have it almost like a outwardly understandable compliance, where it's like, you can't touch other people, you can't jump up, you can't sing and dance in the middle of class. So it's like more compliance for outward measures, and then you maybe do a thing where it's maybe self journaling or some other type of measure where over time you foster through, again, maybe through journaling, a way that someone learns that that they're engaging in ways that you can demonstrate, say for a class of 30 people, where journaling is one way to do it in a measurable way, or in a manageable way, where you're measuring something internal through the journaling, versus like if you had everyone sort of having to express it like externally, vocally. I think it'd be just too much to manage.
I agree.